Live from the DSN Radio Ranch, this is Friday Night Live on Fox Sports Radio 1410. I'm Jim, along with Jeff, the Stack Attack. With us now is former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate for President of the United States. Governor Johnson, thank you for joining us on Fox Friday Night Live.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Well, it's our pleasure. Tonight I'd like to touch on three areas of discussion. First, a little on your biography. Second, a little bit about the Libertarian Party. And then finally, the 2012 presidential campaign. Let's begin by you briefly introducing yourself and your campaign for the presidency to our listeners.
Well, Jim, I am Gary Johnson. I've been an entrepreneur my entire life. Starting a one-man handyman business in Albuquerque in 1974 and actually growing that business to become New Mexico's largest construction employer, 1,000 employees in 1994. I've run for this being my third political office that I've run for, but ran for governor of New Mexico as a Republican, really outside the Republican Party, never been involved in politics before. Got elected governor as a Republican in a state that's 2-to-1 Democrat. Made a name for myself, I think perhaps vetoing more legislation than the other 49 governors in the country combined. I vetoed 750 bills while I was governor of New Mexico, thousands of line item vetoes. Only 2 of those were overturned, so it made a difference when it came to billions of dollars worth of spending. It made a difference when it came to you and I and the time and the money that we were going to have to spend to comply with new government laws that, in my opinion, weren't going to make us any safer, weren't going to make us any better off. And so right now, Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico, Libertarian nominee for president. What's a Libertarian? With a broad brushstroke, I think the majority of Americans are socially accepting and fiscally responsible. I fit in that category. I don't know if Democrats are doing so well when it comes to civil liberties. I don't know if Republicans are doing so well when it comes to dollars and cents. I'd like to think that the Libertarian philosophy embraces the best of both, that civil liberties really do matter and that a balanced budget really matters.
I read your biography, and one of the things that I noted is that you were born in Minot, North Dakota. President Teddy Roosevelt in North Dakota's adopted son said, "I would not have been president if it were not for my time in North Dakota." What set of North Dakota experiences would you point to inform your presidency?
Well, I did. I was born in Minot, and when I was 5 years old, we moved to Moorhead, Minnesota for 1 year, and then we moved to Aberdeen, South Dakota for 8 years. So growing up in the Dakotas, what I remember most, I think, is church, and what I remember most is Boy Scouts. And then, of course, K through 8th grade, really all the formative years, and I really do look back on it and think I got a good formative year background.
You began the 2012 campaign as a Republican candidate for the presidential nomination, and now you're the Libertarian Party nominee. You mentioned that you believed you were somewhat of an outlier in the Republican Party. Why the switch, and what does the Libertarian Party stand for?
Well, I really think that the message that I'm delivering is the same as that of Ron Paul. I believe that my voice represents the largest growing segment, fastest growing segment of American politics today, libertarian. I think a lot more people in this country identify themselves as libertarian as opposed to voting libertarian. So I'm asking that people consider voting for me just this one time, give me a shot at changing things, and if it doesn't work out, why, we can return to status quo. So I'm the only candidate that wants, and when I say I'm the only candidate, as a libertarian, these would be principles that libertarians stand for, but I'm the only candidate that does not want to bomb Iran. I'm the only candidate that wants to get out of Afghanistan tomorrow, bring the troops home. I'm the only candidate that would repeal the Patriot Act. I'm the only candidate that would never have signed the National Defense Authorization Act, allowing for detainment of U.S. citizens without being charged. I'm the only candidate that wants to end the drug war. I'm the only candidate that's promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013, believing that unless we balance the federal budget, unless we get our fiscal house in order, that we're going to suffer a monetary collapse. And a monetary collapse, very simply, is when the dollars that we have in our pocket don't buy anything because of the accompanying inflation that goes along with borrowing and printing money to the tune of 43 cents out of every dollar we're spending. And then I'm the only candidate advocating abolishing the IRS, getting rid of the income tax, getting rid of corporate tax, replacing it with a national consumption tax, which in this case I am embracing the fair tax. For those that are listening, I would love for everybody listening to get online, fairtax.org, and check out the fair tax, which I really think reboots the American economy. It's really the answer when it comes to American jobs, because it does away with corporate tax and income tax, does away with withholdings under a zero corporate tax rate environment. If manufacturing jobs don't flock back to the United States, if the private sector doesn't create tens of millions of jobs, I don't know what it's going to take to create tens of millions of jobs.
In a previous interview, you mentioned that you would like to get rid of the entire federal tax system. Does that reference only the income tax system that you would want to replace with the fair tax?
Well, I want to replace all existing federal tax with one consumption tax. So if you're thinking about state and local taxes, those, of course, are state and local taxes and would remain under the purview of state and local government. But the income tax currently, all of the crony capitalism that goes along with buying loopholes and Washington selling loopholes, that would go away. I think that by adopting the fair tax, we would be issuing pink slips to half of Washington lobbyists because that's why they're there. So one federal consumption tax in lieu of income tax, and all the time that all of us have to spend complying with the income tax, and what I think ends up to be the unfair application of the income tax as opposed to a level fair tax, if you will, for everybody.
Would your fair tax proposal generate approximately the same amount of revenue for the federal government, or would it be more or perhaps less?
Well, it's meant to be revenue neutral, so we still need to cut federal spending by 43%. I am promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. That would lay out a $1.4 trillion reduction in federal spending. Fair tax is, by many accounts, revenue neutral. By accounts that I've read, it actually is a tax reduction. I'd rather be on the safe side and be talking also about a tax reduction. But most importantly, we need to slash federal spending, something that neither of the two old parties are really embracing at all. And I just get back to the consequences of our uncontrolled, unsustainable debt, and the consequences are going to be a monetary collapse. The dollars that we have won't buy a thing because of the ensuing inflation that's going to go along with just what we're doing.
At the end of the year, the Bush tax cuts are scheduled to expire, and some say there are additional draconian cuts in order to address the deficit. At the risk of oversimplification, the Republican plan for avoiding this fiscal cliff relies most heavily on cuts, and the Democratic plan relies on a combination of tax increases as well as cuts. If elected in November, what would you recommend to Congress in order to restore fiscal order?
Well, I think the Republicans, that it's just all smoke and mirrors, that the spending level in Paul Ryan's plan, for example, is a spending level that's higher under Bill Clinton when he was president. So that isn't a spending reduction at all. I am proposing a $1.4 trillion, I will be proposing a $1.4 trillion reduction in federal spending that would balance the federal budget immediately. I'm also promising to veto any legislation where expenses exceed revenue. Jim, I'm believing that if those two promises are kept, even if they override my veto, that spending will be lower with these two promises kept than any other scenario you could possibly come up with. Very important to stop the unsustainable debt that we are racking up.
Let's get back to the election or the campaign, if we could, for just a moment. You mentioned you were a two-term Republican governor of New Mexico. Now you're the nominee of the Libertarian Party for president. You've seen elections from two sides now. Do you think Republicans and Democrats have rigged the election process to make it nearly impossible for a third-party candidate to win?
Yes, they have, and that's just the nature of the beast. It's really hard to be a third-party candidate, but I'd like to point out that all the faces on Mount Rushmore were third-party candidates at one time or another.
Governor, it's been reported that you said participation in the presidential debates is essential for your success. Under current FEC rules, a candidate is required to meet 3 criteria to be eligible for the presidential debates. Unquestionably, you meet 2 of the criteria, the third being that you must be polling at approximately 15%. Most polls have you between 5 and 6%. What is your campaign going to do to meet that standard, or are you going to simultaneously argue that the standard needs to be changed?
Well, first of all, if I were acknowledged right now nationwide as being at 5 or 6%, that in and of itself would be a huge boost. And by boost, people would actually go to my website, Gary Johnson 2012, and check out who I am and what I'm saying, and I think find out that there is nothing in my resume to suggest that I'm not going to doggedly pursue the agenda that I'm talking about. But right now, only 3 polling organizations out of 18 are including my name. So if you fast forward this, my fear is the same fear that the same thing that happened to me in the Republican debate, and that was in the Republican debate, CNN said, "Hey, you've got to be at 1% in A, B, and C poll." Well, I wasn't in A, B, and C poll. So if I'm not in the poll, how do I get into the debate? I asked the Republican Party to simply stand up for putting me in the poll that determined who got in the debate, and they refused to do that. So really, I was booted out of the Republican Party, and this is a message that's unchanged. It's the same as that of Ron Paul, and it's a message that really, in my opinion, does lay out the solutions to the problems that we have.
What issues or viewpoints would you bring to the table that are not being discussed by President Obama or Governor Romney? You mentioned Iran, Iraq, and various other items, but please elaborate on what you think the debate between the 2 major candidates is missing.
Well, I'll just reiterate what I said earlier, and that is look, I'm the only candidate that doesn't want to bomb Iran. I'm the only candidate that wants to get out of Afghanistan and bring the troops home. I'm going to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. That's going to lay out a 43% reduction in Medicaid and Medicare. That's going to lay out a 43% reduction in military spending. And for those that fall off their chair thinking about a 43% reduction in Medicare, if we don't do this, we're going to find ourselves with nothing. We have unfairly burdened young with our retirement and our health care, and the fact that they're never going to be able to retire and they're never going to have health care. They're just going to have to pay for it. Well, they're never going to be able to pay for it. And then President Obama's health care plan. So I'm the only candidate that has never supported government-mandated health care. Romney, Massachusetts, Obama with the National Health Care Plan. But the National Health Care Plan relies on healthy people signing up for insurance to pay for those that aren't so healthy. Well, that burden unfairly falls on the young also because as a group, they are the healthy group. So I think there are some very, very fundamental differences between myself and both of the status quo parties that right now in this country, I think we're on the brink of disaster. And in my opinion, Republicans and Democrats have put the car on cruise control and we're headed over the cliff. Look, let's stop. Let's stop and let's fix this. And if you think it's going to get fixed by either Obama or Romney, I'm arguing otherwise.
You mentioned or alluded to the cost of health care for the uninsured. Right now, folks with health insurance pay about 12% to 15% of their monthly premium to pay for the care of the uninsured who do not pay their medical bills. Would you favor repeal of the law that requires hospitals to serve the uninsured who cannot pay? If you oppose the repeal, who should pay for their health care?
Well, I'm for free market reform of health care. I'm the free market guy. I'm the guy that doesn't want to, no tariffs. Who benefits from goods and services that get supplemented by who knows what country, China? Well, we benefit. We benefit from the lower cost of goods and services. So let me just say, healthcare is about as far removed from free market as it possibly could be. Would I have health insurance to cover myself for ongoing medical need in a free market economy for healthcare? No. In a free market economy for healthcare, there would be advertised pricing. There would be an explosion of more choice available for me, more alternatives when it comes to healthcare. Government could be engaged in blowing the lid off of supply when it comes to healthcare. But when it comes to a healthcare bill, I guess we have 15,000 new IRS agents as opposed to 15,000 new doctors. Well, I just think the entire system is broken, and it starts with the fact that we have an insurance model as opposed to a free market model, where in a free market, I would not have health insurance. I would pay as you go in a system that was very competitive, and I would have health insurance to cover myself for catastrophic injury and illness. So this law has passed. Of course, the Supreme Court upheld the law. Right now, I would like to see it repealed, but if it can't be repealed, there are language changes. For example, without specifying what kind of insurance you and I have to carry, it could just say that we have to carry insurance. And back to free market approaches for health care, that could be just catastrophic injury and illness and a greatly reduced cost for insurance as opposed to what's being prescribed that will end up being very costly. And I do believe that with the health care system that has passed, it's going to be a lot more health care that is going to be doled out, but there isn't more health care to be doled out. So same goods and services, more demand, it's going to result in higher costs.
One last quick question. Perhaps it gives you a chance to repeat some of the things you said earlier, but why should North Dakotans vote for Governor Gary Johnson for President of the United States?
Well, what I'm asking North Dakotans is just to get online and check out my resume. See if what I'm saying, see if there's any doubt in your mind that I'm not going to pursue the agenda that I'm talking about, and see if the agenda that I'm talking about really doesn't lay out the problems and the solutions that go along with what we're facing today. And I'm going to argue that I'm not the third choice, that I'm the only choice, and that for everyone out there that considers themselves a libertarian, how about voting libertarian this time? Give me a chance, and if it doesn't work out, we can go back to the tyranny, we can go back to the increasing police state that this country has turned into. I think we've fought wars over laws like the Patriot Act.
Well, thank you, Governor Johnson, for taking the time to join us here on Fox Friday Night Live. It's greatly appreciated. We wish you all the luck with your campaign in pursuit of the presidency of the United States. We were speaking with former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate for President of the United States.